When a notorious biker gang decided to target a small roadside coffee stand, they thought they'd found an easy mark. What they didn't know was that the quiet woman behind the counter wasn't just serving coffee, she was serving justice. Federal Judge Maria Evans had dedicated her life to transforming lives from the bench, but on this day, she would transform an entire community from behind an espresso machine. This is the incredible true story of how one woman's strength turned a gang of intimidators into protectors of the very community they once terrorized. Before we dive into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got another amazing tale waiting for you tomorrow. The morning sun cast long shadows across Morning Light Coffee's well-worn counter as Maria Evans tied her apron with practiced efficiency. Every Wednesday, she traded her judge's robes for this simple black apron, finding peace in the ritual of helping at her sister Elena's coffee stand. To the regulars, she was just Maria, the kind woman who remembered their orders and always had a warm smile ready. "The usual, Tom?" Maria asked as the retired police officer approached the counter, his weathered face breaking into a familiar grin. "You know it, Maria. Still the best coffee in 3 counties. Tom leaned against the counter, his eyes twinkling. "How's Elena handling the new location?" "Thriving. She's got a good eye for business." Maria began preparing Tom's drink, double espresso, splash of cream. "Though I think she secretly opened this spot just to keep me sane. One morning a week away from the courthouse does wonders." The peaceful morning routine was shattered by the distant rumble of motorcycles. Tom's expression shifted, his old cop instincts kicking in as the sound grew louder. 6 bikes rolled into the parking lot, their chrome glinting in the morning sun. The Storm Riders MC had arrived, and their reputation preceded them. Jake Thunder Thompson dismounted first, his leather cut displaying the club's colors proudly. Marcus Tank Davidson followed, his massive frame casting a shadow across the pavement. The rest of the crew fell in line. Danny Razor Martinez, Mike Ghost Wilson, and 2 prospects whose nervous energy was palpable. "Well, well," Jake announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like we found ourselves a nice little spot." His smirk grew as he watched several customers shift uncomfortably. "Time to introduce ourselves to the neighborhood." Sarah, the young barista working with Maria, tensed visibly as the bikers approached. "Maria," she whispered, "maybe we should call someone." Maria placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "It's all right. Just stay calm and let me handle this." The bikers pushed their way to the front of the line, ignoring the protests of waiting customers. Jake leaned against the counter, his smirk firmly in place. "Morning, sweetheart. Nice little setup you got here." "Good morning," Maria replied evenly. "There's a line if you'd like to order. I'll be happy to serve you when it's your turn." Jake's smirk faltered slightly, then returned with an edge. "Maybe you didn't hear me right. See, this is Storm Riders territory now. And in our territory, we make the rules." Tank stepped forward, his massive frame intimidating in the small space. "Boss said we're next. You got a problem with that?" Tom set his coffee down, starting to rise, but Maria caught his eye and gave a subtle shake of her head. She knew escalation wasn't the answer. Not yet. "Actually, I do have a problem with that," Maria said, her voice calm but firm. "This is a place of business and everyone follows the same rules. Even the Storm Riders." Jake's amusement turned to irritation. "Listen, lady, you clearly don't know who we are or how this works. So let me explain it nice and simple. You either play by our rules or things start getting complicated." "Is that a threat, Mr. Thompson?" Maria's voice carried a new weight, one that made Jake pause. "You know my name?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "I know quite a bit about you and the Storm Riders. In fact, I believe you're scheduled to appear in my courtroom next week. Federal Judge Maria Evans, though I much prefer serving coffee to serving sentences." The color drained from Jake's face as the implications sank in. The other bikers shifted uncomfortably, their earlier bravado evaporating. Tank took a step back, his intimidating presence suddenly less certain. "A judge?" Razor muttered. Boss, maybe we should... Jake held up a hand, silencing him. His smirk returned, but it was forced. Well, well, ain't that interesting. A judge slumming it at a coffee stand. Wonder what the papers would think about that. They'd probably find it less interesting than your upcoming racketeering case, Maria replied evenly. Now, would you like to order something, or are you done attempting to intimidate my sister's business? The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Customers watched the exchange with a mix of fear and fascination. Tom remained ready to intervene, though Maria's calm control of the situation made it clear she didn't need help. Jake studied Maria for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed this unexpected turn of events. Finally, he straightened up, adjusting his leather cut. You know what? I'm not feeling coffee today. Boys, let's ride. The bikers began backing away, their exit less dramatic than their entrance. But Jake wasn't finished. He turned back at the door, his voice carrying a clear threat. This isn't over, Your Honor. Not by a long shot. You're right, Mr. Thompson, Maria replied. It's just beginning, and how it ends is entirely up to you. The storm riders roared out of the parking lot, leaving behind a wake of tension and uncertainty. Sarah let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Maria, what are we going to do? Maria began wiping down the counter, her movements deliberate and calm. We're going to serve coffee, Sarah. And next week, when Mr. Thompson and his friends appear in my courtroom, we're going to serve justice. Sometimes people need to learn that true strength isn't about intimidation. It's about standing up for what's right. Tom watched the bikers disappear down the highway, then turned back to Maria with a knowing smile. You know they'll be back. I'm counting on it, Maria replied. Some people need to learn their lessons in a courtroom. Others need to learn them over a cup of coffee. Either way, I'll be ready. The morning sun continued its climb, casting shorter shadows across the counter as customers slowly returned to their routines. But something had changed at Morning Light Coffee. A line had been drawn, a stand had been taken, and a simple coffee stand had become the unlikely battleground for a showdown between justice and intimidation. The storm riders would indeed return, but they would find that they had messed with the wrong woman, a woman who served both coffee and justice with equal measure. The next morning, Elena arrived early to find Maria already at the coffee stand, methodically checking the equipment. You didn't have to come in today, Elena said, setting down her purse. It's not your usual Wednesday. After yesterday, I'm exactly where I need to be. Maria tested the espresso machine, her movements precise. Besides, I have a feeling our new friends might return. Elena's face tightened with worry. I heard about the storm riders. Tom called me last night. Maybe we should close for a few days, just until things settle down. That's exactly what they want, Maria replied, her voice firm. Fear is their currency, Elena. We can't let them trade in it here. The morning crowd began trickling in, though noticeably smaller than usual. Sarah arrived for her shift, her usual cheerful demeanor subdued. I almost called in sick, she admitted, tying her apron. But then I thought about how you stood up to them, Maria. I want to be brave like that. Bravery isn't about not being scared, Maria told her. It's about doing what's right despite being scared. The morning progressed quietly until the rumble of motorcycles cut through the air again. This time it wasn't the full gang, just Jake and Tank, rolling into the parking lot with deliberate slowness. The few customers present quickly gathered their things and left. Jake sauntered up to the counter, his smirk firmly in place. Morning, Your Honor. Had some time to think about our conversation yesterday? Mr. Thompson, Maria acknowledged calmly. Would you like to order something today, or are we still pretending this is about territory? Tank stepped forward, his massive frame looming. Watch your tone, lady. Judge or not, you're still on our turf. Actually, Elena spoke up, surprising everyone. This is my turf. I own this property, and I decide who's welcome here. Jake's smirk widened. Ownership's a funny thing. Sometimes accidents happen. Property changes hands. Would be a shame if something happened to this nice little setup. Are you threatening my sister, Mr. Thompson? Maria's voice carried an edge of steel. Because that would be a very poor decision, especially given your current legal situation. Not threatening, Jake replied smoothly. Just having a friendly business discussion. Right, Tank? Tank cracked his knuckles meaningfully. Real friendly. Let me be clear, Maria said, stepping around the counter to face Jake directly. Your case comes before me next week. Every threat you make, every attempt at intimidation, only proves that you're exactly what the prosecution claims, a criminal organization that preys on legitimate businesses. Jake's smirk faltered. You can't use this against us in court. Can't I? Your behavior here demonstrates a clear pattern of criminal activity. In fact, Maria glanced at the security cameras Elena had installed. Everything you're doing is being recorded, so please, continue making threats. You're only building the case against yourself. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jake's face. He hadn't counted on the cameras. Tank shifted uncomfortably, his intimidating presence diminishing slightly. You think you're so smart, Jake growled, but you don't know what you're dealing with. The Storm Riders don't back down, not for anyone. Then perhaps it's time you learned, Maria replied. Because this isn't just about coffee anymore. This is about justice, community, and standing up to bullies who think they can take whatever they want. Jake stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You really want to make enemies of us? We can make life very difficult for you and your sister. And I can make sure you spend the next decade in federal prison, Maria countered. Your choice, Mr. Thompson. Walk away now or face the consequences of your actions. The tension crackled between them. For a moment, it seemed like Jake might do something rash, but then Tank placed a hand on his shoulder. Boss, maybe we should think this through. She's got cameras and that court date. Jake shrugged off Tank's hand, but took a step back. This isn't over, he snarled. Not by a long shot. Actually, it is, Maria said firmly. You just don't realize it yet. The bikers retreated to their motorcycles, the roar of their engines carrying a promise of return. As they disappeared down the highway, Elena let out a shaky breath. Maria, what are you doing? These men are dangerous. So is letting them think they can control people through fear, Maria replied. Sometimes justice needs to be served outside the courtroom. Sarah watched the interaction with wide eyes. But what if they come back with the whole gang? They will, Maria said, returning to the counter. And when they do, they'll learn that true strength isn't about intimidation. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The rest of the morning passed in tense anticipation, but the Storm Riders didn't return. Regular customers slowly filtered back in, word spreading about how Judge Evans had stood up to the notorious bikers. Tom made a point of staying longer than usual, his retired cop instincts on high alert. You're playing a dangerous game, Maria, he said quietly as the morning rush died down. I've dealt with the Storm Riders before. They don't take kindly to being challenged. Neither do I, Maria replied, wiping down the counter. Someone needs to show them that their tactics don't work here, that this community is stronger than their intimidation. And you think you're the one to do it? Maria paused, looking out at the highway where the bikers had disappeared. I think sometimes justice needs a personal touch. They came here expecting to find an easy target. Instead, they found someone who understands both law and justice, and knows the difference between the two. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the coffee stand. Maria knew the confrontation was far from over. The Storm Riders would return, probably in greater numbers, trying to prove their dominance. But she had drawn a line in the sand, and she wouldn't back down. This quiet coffee stand had become more than just a refuge from her duties as a judge. It had become a battlefield in a larger war against intimidation and fear. And Maria Evans was ready for whatever came next. As evening settled over morning light coffee, Maria, Elena, and Sarah stayed late, discussing their next steps. The day's confrontation had left them all on edge but determined. Maria was in the middle of outlining a security plan when the rumble of multiple motorcycles shattered the twilight calm. "They're back," Sarah whispered, her hands trembling as she peered through the window. "There's more of them this time." The storm riders rolled into the parking lot, their bikes forming a menacing semicircle around the coffee stand. Jake led the pack, followed by Tank, Razor, Ghost, and at least 8 other members. Their leather cuts gleamed in the fading light, the gang's emblem a stark warning. "Elena, Sarah, go to the back," Maria said calmly, untying her apron. "Call Tom, but not the police. Not yet." "Maria, you can't face them alone," Elena protested. "I'm not alone," Maria replied, her eyes fixed on the approaching bikers. "I have the law on my side." Jake pushed through the door first, his swagger more pronounced than before. The rest of the gang filed in behind him, filling the small space with their intimidating presence. The air grew thick with tension. "Evening, Your Honor," Jake sneered. "Thought we'd bring some friends by for coffee. Hope that's not a problem." Maria stood her ground behind the counter, her posture relaxed but alert. "The stand's closed, Mr. Thompson, but I'm sure you didn't come here for coffee anyway." Tank moved to flank Jake, his massive frame casting long shadows in the evening light. "Maybe we just wanted to have a friendly chat about territory and respect." "Respect is earned," Maria replied evenly. "Something your organization seems to have forgotten." Jake's smirk turned dangerous. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Standing there acting all high and mighty. But out here, you're not in your courtroom. Out here, different rules apply. The law applies everywhere, Mr. Thompson. Even here." "The law?" Jake laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Look around, Judge. You see any law here? All I see is you, alone, trying to play hero." As if on cue, Razor and Ghost began moving through the space, deliberately knocking over chairs and displays. The message was clear. They were showing their power, their control. "You know," Jake continued, leaning against the counter, "accidents happen all the time to small businesses. Fires, break-ins, vandalism. Real shame when that happens." Maria's voice remained steady. "Are you actually threatening arson and vandalism in front of a federal judge? While being recorded? That's quite bold, even for the storm riders." Jake's expression darkened. "You think those cameras scare us? You think anything scares us?" "I think you're already scared," Maria replied. "Otherwise, you wouldn't need to bring your entire gang to intimidate a coffee stand. Real strength doesn't need an audience, Mr. Thompson." The words hit home. Jake's facade cracked slightly, anger seeping through. "You don't know anything about real strength. Let me show you what happens to people who don't respect our territory." He nodded to Tank, who stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. But before he could move further, the door chimed. Tom Cooper walked in, followed by David Chen and several other regular customers. They moved to stand near Maria, their message clear. She wasn't alone. "Evening, Jake," Tom said casually, his old cop presence filling the room. "Causing trouble again?" Jake's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. The odds had shifted, but backing down would mean losing face in front of his crew. "This isn't your business, old man," Jake growled. "Actually, it is," David Chen spoke up. "This coffee stand? It's part of our community, and we protect our own." The storm riders shifted uneasily. This wasn't how they'd expected the evening to play out. Maria watched the change in their demeanor with careful attention. "You see, Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, "that's the difference between intimidation and real strength. Real strength brings people together. Intimidation only shows how weak you really are." Jake's fists clenched as he struggled with his options. Finally, he straightened up, adjusting his cut. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Actually," Maria replied, "it is, because come Monday morning I'm going to recuse myself from your case." Jake's head snapped up in surprise. "What? I can't be impartial now, given our interactions. So your case will go to Judge Harrison." Maria's slight smile carried weight. "And just between us, she's much less lenient than I am." The color drained from Jake's face. Judge Harrison was notorious for her harsh sentences, especially with organized crime. "You set us up," he realized too late. "No, Mr. Thompson. You did that all by yourself. Every threat, every act of intimidation. You've proven exactly what kind of organization you run. And now you'll face the consequences." Jake looked around the room, seeing his power play dissolve before his eyes. His crew was already backing toward the door, their earlier confidence shattered. "Let's ride," he barked, trying to maintain some semblance of control. But everyone could see the truth. The Storm Riders had lost this battle before it even began. As the bikers filed out, Maria's voice followed them. "Mr. Thompson, your court date is still Monday. I'd suggest showing up with a better attitude than you've displayed here." The roar of motorcycles filled the air as the gang sped away, their retreat marked by the same noise they'd arrived with. But this time, it sounded more like desperation than intimidation. Tom turned to Maria with a grin. "Judge Harrison, that was clever. Sometimes justice needs a little strategic planning," Maria replied, straightening the knocked-over displays. They came expecting to find weakness. Instead, they found a community ready to stand together. Elena and Sarah emerged from the back, relief evident on their faces. "Do you think they'll really stay away?" Sarah asked. Maria looked out at the darkness where the bikers had disappeared. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "But next time, they'll be facing more than just us. They'll be facing the power of a united community, and that's something no amount of intimidation can overcome." Monday morning arrived with a tension that hung heavy in the courthouse air. Maria sat in her chambers, reviewing the Storm Riders case file one last time before submitting her recusal. The evidence was substantial: racketeering, extortion, intimidation of local businesses. And now, their actions at Morning Light Coffee had added another layer to their criminal pattern. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, already knowing who it would be. District Attorney James Phillips entered, his expression concerned. "Judge Evans, we need to talk about the Storm Riders case. Word is you're recusing yourself?" "I have to, James. They made the mistake of targeting my sister's coffee stand. I can't be impartial now." The DA sat down, running a hand through his graying hair. "That's exactly why we need you on this case. You've seen firsthand what they're capable of." "Which is precisely why I can't preside over it," Maria replied firmly. "But don't worry. Judge Harrison will handle it appropriately." A ghost of a smile crossed Philip's face. "Harrison? That's strategic. Sometimes justice needs a clear message." Before they could continue, Maria's phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "They're here. All of them." Maria's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, James. I need to handle something." "The Storm Riders?" he asked, rising. "Want me to call in backup?" "Not yet. Let's see how they handle actual consequences first." Maria drove to the coffee stand, her heart racing despite her calm exterior. As she pulled into the lot, she saw them, the entire Storm Riders MC, their bikes lined up like a wall of chrome and steel. Jake stood at the counter, leaning in close to Elena, while Tank and the others spread throughout the space. Maria entered quietly, assessing the situation. Elena's face was pale but determined as she faced down Jake. "Final warning," Jake was saying. "Sign over the property, or things get ugly." "The only ugly thing here is your attempt at intimidation," Maria's voice cut through the tension, "especially on the morning of your court appearance." Jake spun around, his face twisting with anger. This is all your fault." "No, Mr. Thompson. This is the consequence of your own actions. Now, would you like to add witness intimidation to your charges, or would you like to leave while you still can?" Tank stepped forward, his patience clearly worn thin. "We're done playing games with you, Judge. This ends today." "I couldn't agree more," Maria replied, pulling out her phone. "Which is why I've just texted District Attorney Phillips. He's very interested in your organization's latest activities." The atmosphere shifted as Maria's words sank in. Razor, always the cautious one, spoke up. "Boss, we should go. This isn't worth it." "Shut up," Jake snapped, but his voice carried a note of panic. "We're not backing down, not now." "Then let me be clear," Maria said, stepping closer. "Every moment you stay here, every threat you make, is being recorded and added to your case file. Judge Harrison is particularly interested in organizations that show no remorse or willingness to change." The mention of Harrison's name had its intended effect. Several gang members shifted uncomfortably, and even Tank took a step back. "You think you're so clever," Jake snarled, "using the law like a weapon." "The law isn't a weapon, Mr. Thompson. It's a shield, protecting those who need it from those who would abuse their power. Right now you're proving exactly why that shield is necessary." Elena moved to stand beside her sister, her fear replaced by determination. "Our family has run businesses in this community for 3 generations. We're not going anywhere." Jake looked around, seeing his control of the situation slipping away. In the distance, sirens could be heard approaching. "Those would be the deputies," Maria said calmly. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in this gathering, especially given your pending court appearance." "Boss," Ghost spoke up for the first time. "We need to go. Now." Jake's face contorted with fury and frustration. He pointed at Maria, his finger shaking. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Actually, Mr. Thompson, it is. Because now you have a choice. Leave now and face your charges like a man, or stay and add to them. Your decision." The sirens grew louder. Jake's resolve crumbled visibly as he realized the corner he'd backed himself into. "Storm Riders," he barked. "We're out." The gang members couldn't leave fast enough, their earlier bravado replaced by urgent self-preservation. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as they sped away, just as the first police cruiser turned into the lot. Deputy Sarah Martinez stepped out, taking in the scene. "Judge Evans, everything okay here?" "Yes, Deputy," Maria replied. "Just some potential defendants making poor decisions, though you might want to note that the Storm Riders were here, attempting to intimidate witnesses before their court appearance." The deputy smiled grimly. "I'm sure Judge Harrison will find that very interesting." Elena hugged her sister tightly. "I was so scared," she whispered. "But I knew you'd come." "I'll always come," Maria replied. "That's what family does. That's what community does." As the deputies took statements and gathered evidence, Maria looked out at the highway where the Storm Riders had disappeared. She knew this wasn't truly over. Men like Jake Thompson didn't give up easily. But something had changed today. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, the Storm Riders were feeling the weight of real justice bearing down on them. "You know they'll try something else," Elena said, reading her sister's thoughts. "Let them try," Maria replied. "They're learning the hard way that true strength isn't about intimidation. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." The morning sun climbed higher, casting new light on the coffee stand that had become an unlikely battleground for justice. The Storm Riders had wanted to teach a lesson about power. Instead, they were learning one about justice, community, and the strength that comes from standing together against intimidation. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Jake Thompson and the Storm Riders filed into Judge Harrison's courtroom. Maria watched from the gallery, noting how different they looked in court-mandated suits instead of their leather cuts. Even Tank's massive frame seemed diminished without his gang colors. Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, peered over her reading glasses at the defendants. "Mr. Thompson, I understand there was an incident this morning involving witness intimidation." Jake's lawyer, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit, quickly stood. "Your Honor, my client denies any—" "Save it," Harrison cut him off. "I've seen the security footage. In fact, I've seen quite a bit of footage over the past few days. Would you care to explain why your client thought it was appropriate to threaten a federal judge and her family's business?" Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The swagger he'd shown at the coffee stand was nowhere to be seen. Behind him, several Storm Riders exchanged worried glances. District Attorney Phillips rose smoothly. Your Honor, in light of these new events, the state would like to amend the charges to include witness intimidation, attempted extortion, and criminal harassment. Objection, Jake's lawyer sputtered. These new allegations haven't been properly overruled, Harrison snapped. Mr. Thompson, stand up. Jake rose slowly, his face a mask of barely contained rage. I've been watching your organization for years, Harrison continued. The protection rackets, the intimidation, the way you prey on small businesses. Now you've escalated to threatening a federal judge and her family. Give me one reason why I shouldn't revoke your bail right now. Before Jake could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Elena rushed in, her face pale. Maria, she called out, ignoring courthouse protocol. The stand. They vandalized everything. The Stormriders supporters in the gallery began to murmur, some even smirking, but their satisfaction was short-lived. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Bailiff, take Mr. Thompson and his associates into custody, now. Your Honor, Jake's lawyer protested, you can't prove my clients had anything to do with... Really? Harrison's voice could have frozen fire. Because I'm looking at a text message sent from Mr. Thompson's phone less than an hour ago ordering the hit. Did you think we weren't monitoring your communications? The color drained from Jake's face. Behind him, Tank cursed under his breath, and Razor closed his eyes in defeat. Maria stood up, her voice carrying across the courtroom. Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to make a suggestion. Harrison nodded, allowing her to approach the bench. The Stormriders have shown us who they are, Maria began. But perhaps this is an opportunity to show them who they could be. Instead of just punishment, maybe we can offer transformation. What exactly are you suggesting, Judge Evans? Community service, extensive community service. Make them rebuild what they've destroyed, not just at the coffee stand, but throughout the neighborhood. Let them experience firsthand the community they've been terrorizing. Jake's head snapped up, surprise replacing his anger. Harrison considered the proposal, tapping her pen thoughtfully. Mr. Thompson? Harrison addressed him directly. You have two choices. Option 1, I revoke your bail, add the new charges, and you face what could amount to 20 years. Option 2, you and your entire organization commit to an intensive community service program under strict supervision. You'll rebuild what you've destroyed, mentor at-risk youth, and prove you can be more than just thugs on motorcycles. The courtroom held its breath. Jake looked back at his gang members, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their faces. For the first time, he seemed to realize just how much his leadership had cost them. And if we choose the community service? He asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. Then you'll have a chance to rewrite your story, Maria answered before Harrison could. To transform your organization from one that terrorizes the community to one that protects it. The choice is yours, Harrison added. But choose quickly. My patience, unlike Judge Evans, is not unlimited. Jake turned to his crew. Tank nodded slowly, followed by Razor. One by one, the Stormriders showed their support for taking the deal. We'll take option 2, Jake said finally. The community service. A wise choice, Harrison replied. But understand this. One misstep, one return to your old ways, and you'll face the full weight of your original charges. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. As the details of the agreement were worked out, Maria slipped out of the courtroom to join Elena. Together, they drove back to Morning Light Coffee. The damage was extensive, windows broken, equipment smashed, graffiti covering the walls. I'm so sorry, Elena, Maria said softly, but Elena was already rolling up her sleeves. Don't be. Look. Community members were arriving, bringing cleaning supplies, tools, and offers of help. Tom Cooper was organizing a cleanup crew, and David Chen was already calling contractors. They tried to break us, Elena said, but they only made us stronger. Maria watched as more neighbors arrived to help. Sometimes the worst in people brings out the best in others. You think they'll really change? Elena asked, picking up a broom. The storm riders? Maria looked at the destruction around them, then at the community coming together to rebuild. They'll have to, because now they're going to experience firsthand what real strength looks like, the strength of a community standing together. The next morning arrived with an unusual scene at Morning Light Coffee. Jake Thompson and 5 other storm riders stood awkwardly in their court-mandated community service vests, watching as Maria outlined their restoration work. "The windows need replacing first," she instructed, pointing to the broken glass. "Then the counter, the equipment, and finally the exterior. Everything needs to be better than it was before." Jake shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "This is humiliating," he muttered. "More humiliating than destroying a small business to prove your power," Maria countered. "This isn't about humiliation, Mr. Thompson. It's about redemption." Tank, surprisingly, was the first to step forward. "Just tell us what to do. The sooner we start, the sooner we finish." As the bikers began clearing debris, local news vans pulled into the parking lot. The story of a federal judge transforming a notorious biker gang through community service had caught media attention. "No cameras," Jake growled, turning away from the reporters. "Actually," Maria interjected, "the cameras stay. The community needs to see this. They need to know you're serious about making amends." Razor, working nearby, paused his sweeping. "She's right, boss. We created this mess in public. Maybe we need to fix it in public too." The morning progressed with an unusual rhythm. The storm riders, stripped of their leather cuts and working in bright orange vests, gradually fell into a steady work pattern. Local contractors, initially wary, began teaching them basic construction skills. Elena arrived with coffee for everyone, including the bikers. Jake stared at his cup in surprise when she handed it to him. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Elena replied, "even those who didn't think we deserved a first one." As the day wore on, something unexpected began to happen. The bikers, forced to work alongside the very community they'd terrorized, started seeing things differently. They heard stories about the businesses they'd threatened, the families they'd scared, the lives they'd impacted. A young boy, maybe 12, approached the work site with his mother. He stared at Tank with wide eyes. "Are you really fixing the coffee stand?" the boy asked. Tank paused his work, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, kid, we're fixing what we broke." "But I thought you were the bad guys." The words hit Tank harder than any punch. He glanced at the other storm riders, seeing his own discomfort reflected in their faces. "We were," Tank admitted. "But maybe we're trying to be something different now." Maria, observing the interaction, saw something shift in the bikers' demeanor. It was subtle, but it was there, the first crack in their hardened exterior. Later, during their lunch break, Jake approached Maria. "This isn't what I expected," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Punishment. Humiliation. Not—" He gestured at the community members working alongside them. This is what community looks like, Mr. Thompson. Not territory to control, but people to connect with. People who will help you if you let them." The afternoon brought more surprises. David Chen, whose restaurant had once been targeted by the storm riders, arrived with food for everyone. The bikers initially refused, but David insisted. "You're doing good work," he told them. "That deserves recognition." Razor, eating his meal, looked troubled. "We tried to shake him down last year," he whispered to Jake. "And now he's feeding us." "That's what's been missing from your organization," Maria said, overhearing them. "You've been so focused on taking from the community that you never experienced what it's like to be part of it." As the day drew to a close, the transformation was already visible, not just in the partially restored coffee stand, but in the storm riders themselves. They worked with purpose now, taking pride in their repairs. A small crowd had gathered to watch, including some of the bikers' families. Tank's teenage daughter stood nearby, watching her father work with a mix of surprise and pride. "I've never seen him like this," she told Maria. "Sometimes people just need a chance to show who they really are," Maria replied. Jake, overhearing this, stared at his hands. calloused now from honest work rather than fighting. "We've been going about this all wrong," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "It's not too late to go about it right," Maria answered. As the sun set, the first day of community service came to an end. The coffee stand was already looking better, but more importantly, something had changed in the storm riders. They gathered their tools with care, their earlier resentment replaced by something closer to purpose. "Same time tomorrow?" Maria asked. Jake looked at his crew, then back at the work they'd accomplished. "Yeah," he said. "We'll be here. We've got a lot to make up for." "This isn't just about making up for the past," Maria told him. "It's about building a different future. Are you ready for that?" For the first time since this began, Jake met her eyes without anger or defiance. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe we all are." The transformation of morning light coffee continued over the next few days, but not without challenges. On the fourth morning of community service, Maria arrived to find Jake and Tank in a heated argument with 3 members of a rival gang, the Iron Wolves. "Look at you," one of the Iron Wolves taunted. "The mighty Storm Riders, wearing orange vests and playing carpenter. You're a joke now." Tank's fists clenched, his old instinct surfacing. But before he could react, Jake placed a restraining hand on his arm. "We've got work to do," Jake said calmly. "This isn't our game anymore." The Iron Wolves' leader, a man known as Viper, stepped forward. "Maybe we should take over your territory, since you're too busy playing community helper." Maria approached, her presence commanding attention. "Gentlemen, is there a problem?" "Stay out of this, Judge," Viper sneered. "This is biker business." "Actually," Jake interrupted, surprising everyone, "it's community business now, and in this community, we handle things differently." The Iron Wolves laughed, but their amusement died when they noticed local residents gathering around, phones recording the interaction. Tom Cooper stood nearby, arms crossed, while David Chen and other business owners watched from their storefronts. "You're surrounded by witnesses," Maria pointed out, "including several law enforcement officers having coffee across the street. Choose your next moves carefully." Viper glanced around, realizing the situation had shifted. "This isn't over, Thompson. You're going to regret going soft." As the Iron Wolves rode away, Tank turned to Jake. "Boss, we can't let them think we're weak." "Being strong doesn't mean what we thought it did," Jake replied, picking up his tools. "Look around. We've got more respect now than we ever did through intimidation." The day's work continued, but the morning's confrontation had stirred something in the Storm Riders. During lunch, Razor approached Maria with an idea. "What if we used our skills for something good?" he suggested. "We know every gang in the area, every trouble spot. We could help protect businesses instead of threatening them." Maria studied him thoughtfully. "Like community guardians instead of intimidators?" "Exactly. We've got the manpower, the network. We just need to use it differently." The idea spread through the crew like wildfire. By afternoon, the Storm Riders were brainstorming ways to transform their organization while they worked. Even Tank, usually focused on muscle, contributed suggestions about youth outreach. "My daughter," he said hesitantly, "she's always saying I should do something positive with my life. Maybe this is it." Elena, watching the transformation unfold, brought out a fresh pot of coffee. "You know," she said to Jake, "this stand could be your first success story, from targets to protectors." Jake paused his work, considering. "We've got a lot to make up for. Not just here, but everywhere we've caused trouble." "Then make up for it," Maria suggested. "One business, one person at a time." As the day progressed, more community members stopped by, offering support and suggestions. A local youth counselor discussed programs where reformed bikers could mentor at-risk teens. A business association representative talked about community patrol possibilities. The Storm Riders, initially skeptical, found themselves drawn into these conversations. Their street knowledge and organizational skills, previously used for intimidation, could be valuable assets for community protection. Late afternoon brought another surprise. Tank's daughter arrived with several of her friends from the local high school. "Dad," she called out. "We've got an idea. The community center needs volunteers for their after-school program. They said the Storm Riders could help if you're really serious about changing." Tank looked at Jake, uncertainty crossing his face. Jake nodded slowly. "We're serious," Jake answered. "Tell them we'll be there." As the sun began to set, Maria gathered everyone for a final meeting. The coffee stand was nearly restored, looking better than before, but something else had been restored too, a sense of purpose among the Storm Riders. "Tomorrow's the last official day of your community service here," Maria announced. "But this doesn't have to be the end of your community involvement." Jake looked at his crew, then at the coffee stand they'd rebuilt. "No," he said firmly. "This is just the beginning. The Storm Riders aren't finished. We're just getting started on something new." "A new chapter," Tank added, glancing at his daughter. "One worth being proud of." Maria watched as the bikers cleared their tools for the day, noting how they treated the coffee stand with a sense of ownership now, not as territory to control, but as something they'd helped rebuild. "You know," Elena said quietly to her sister, "when this started, I thought you were crazy, but you saw something in them that everyone else missed." "I saw people who needed a purpose bigger than themselves," Maria replied. "Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about transformation." As the Storm Riders prepared to leave, Jake lingered behind. "Judge Evans," he called out. "Thank you. Not just for the second chance, but for showing us there was something worth changing for." "The real test starts tomorrow," Maria reminded him, "when you're not required to be here. What will the Storm Riders choose to be then?" Jake looked at his crew, then back at Maria with newfound determination. Something better. Something that makes a difference. The sun set on another day of transformation, but everyone knew this was more than just community service now. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the Storm Riders, but for an entire community learning the true meaning of justice, redemption, and the power of second chances. The first test of the Storm Riders' transformation came sooner than anyone expected. The day after their official community service ended, Morning Light Coffee opened early, its restoration complete. Maria arrived to find Jake and several Storm Riders already there, not in orange vests, but in their leather cuts, now modified with a new patch that read, "Community Guardian." "We figured the place might need protection," Jake explained, "especially after the Iron Wolves visit." Maria studied the new patches. "Your choice to be here?" "Yeah," Jake nodded. "Some of the crew didn't like the changes. They left. But the ones who stayed? We're all in." The morning proceeded smoothly until a group of Iron Wolves motorcycles roared into the parking lot. This time, they came in force, 15 bikes strong. Viper led them, his face twisted with contempt. "Well, look at this," Viper sneered. "The Storm Riders, playing security guard. How cute." Jake stepped forward, Tank and Razor flanking him, but instead of aggression, his posture remained calm. "You're welcome to come in and order coffee," he said evenly. "But if you're here to cause trouble, you should know things are different now." "Different?" Viper laughed. "Yeah, we can see that. The mighty Storm Riders, reduced to protecting a coffee stand." "Not reduced," Jake corrected. "Elevated. We're protecting our community now. All of it." Maria watched the exchange from inside, noting how the Storm Riders maintained their composure. Even Tank, usually quick to anger, stood steady. Viper dismounted his bike, his crew following suit. "You've gone soft, Thompson. Someone needs to remind you what being a real biker means." Before tensions could escalate further, several police cruisers pulled into the lot. But it wasn't just the police. Dozens of community members had arrived too. Business owners, residents, even some of Tank's daughter's friends from the youth center. They formed a line behind the Storm Riders. "This is what being real means," Jake said, gesturing to the crowd. "Having something worth protecting, people worth standing with." Viper looked around, realizing he was surrounded not just by cops and Storm Riders, but by an entire community. His sneer faltered. "You're making a mistake, Thompson," he growled. "This isn't over." Actually, it is, Maria spoke up, stepping outside. Because right now every business in this area is filing for protective orders against the Iron Wolves. Every incident will be documented, every threat reported. You can choose to adapt, like the Storm Riders have, or you can face the consequences. The Iron Wolves shifted uncomfortably. They had come expecting a gang fight, not a united community front. "This is your territory now?" Viper asked Jake mockingly. "No," Jake replied. "It's not about territory anymore. It's about community. Something you might want to think about before you lose everything like we almost did." Elena emerged from the coffee stand, carrying a tray of cups. "Coffee's ready," she announced calmly. "Free for anyone who wants to join our community meeting about neighborhood safety." The absurdity of the situation, a potential gang confrontation turned into a community coffee gathering, wasn't lost on anyone. Several Iron Wolves actually chuckled, the tension breaking. Viper looked at his crew, then back at the scene before him. The Storm Riders weren't backing down, but they weren't escalating either. They stood firm, supported by police and citizens alike. "This isn't how things work," Viper protested, but his voice held more confusion than threat now. "Maybe it's time things worked differently," Tank suggested, surprising everyone with his diplomatic tone. "The old way? It's a dead end. We figured that out. Question is, are you smart enough to figure it out too?" The Iron Wolves leader studied the scene for a long moment. Finally, he shook his head. "You've lost your minds," he declared, but his words lacked conviction. "Let's ride." As the Iron Wolves roared away, the community broke into applause. The Storm Riders had faced their first real test, and passed it without throwing a single punch. "That was impressive," Maria told Jake, "especially the restraint." "Learned from the best," Jake replied with a slight smile. "You showed us there's more power in standing together than in knocking people down." The impromptu community meeting turned into a genuine discussion about neighborhood safety. The Storm Riders, still in their modified cuts, contributed insights about potential trouble spots and solutions. "We know every alley, every corner where problems start," Razor explained to the group. "Instead of using that knowledge to cause trouble, we can use it to prevent it." Tank's daughter, who had arrived during the confrontation, beamed with pride as she watched her father help organize neighborhood watch routes. "This is what being tough really means," she told Maria. "Standing up for what's right, even when your old friends think you're wrong." As the meeting continued, Elena pulled Maria aside. "When you first suggested rehabilitating them, I thought you were naive," she admitted. "But you saw something in them that nobody else did." "I saw people who needed a purpose," Maria replied. "They had the strength and organization. They just needed to learn how to use it for something positive." The day ended with concrete plans for community patrols, youth outreach programs, and business protection strategies, all involving the reformed Storm Riders working alongside law enforcement and community leaders. "You know," Jake said to Maria as things wound down, "when you first confronted us, I thought you were just another authority figure trying to push us around. But you weren't pushing us down. You were pushing us forward." Maria watched as the Storm Riders helped clean up from the meeting, interacting easily with the same community members they once terrorized. "Sometimes," she replied, "people just need to be shown a better path. The strength to walk it? That was in you all along." Word of the Storm Riders' transformation spread through the biker community like wildfire. Not everyone was happy about it. A week after the Iron Wolves confrontation, Maria arrived at Morning Light Coffee to find Jake in an intense discussion with former Storm Riders who had left the gang over the changes. "You're destroying everything we built," accused Steve Hammer Harrison, former Storm Riders enforcer. "Years of reputation, gone because you went soft." Jake remained calm, his new confidence evident. "What exactly did we build, Hammer? Fear? Intimidation? Look around. We're building something real now." The coffee stand had become a symbol of change. The Storm Riders' new community center was taking shape next door, converted from their old clubhouse. Through the windows, Tank could be seen mentoring teenagers in a mechanics program. "You turned our clubhouse into a daycare," another former member spat. No, Jake corrected. We turned it into a future. Those kids you're mocking, they're learning skills, finding direction, just like we should have done years ago. Maria watched from inside, ready to intervene, but recognizing that Jake needed to handle this himself. Elena stood beside her, nervously wiping the counter. Should we call the police? Elena whispered. Not yet, Maria replied. This is an important moment for them. Hammer stepped closer to Jake, his voice dropping menacingly. The other clubs are laughing at us. The Storm Riders used to mean something. We mean more now than we ever did, Jake responded. We're not just taking from the community anymore. We're part of it, building it, protecting it. As if to prove his point, a group of local business owners arrived for their morning coffee. Instead of avoiding the bikers, they greeted Jake and his crew warmly. The contrast between the old way and the new couldn't have been clearer. This isn't over, Thompson, Hammer warned. The old guard won't stand for this. The old guard needs to evolve, came Tank's voice as he emerged from the community center. Or they'll get left behind. The teenagers Tank had been mentoring watched through the windows, including his daughter. Their presence seemed to emphasize everything that had changed. You're choosing them over us? Hammer demanded, gesturing at the community members. Over your brothers? No, Jake replied firmly. I'm choosing a future over a past, real strength over fear, family over fear. Razor, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Remember why we started riding in the first place, Hammer? Freedom, brotherhood. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. Turned into the very thing we used to hate, bullies. The word hung in the air. Several of the former members shifted uncomfortably, perhaps seeing their old behavior through new eyes. Maria finally stepped outside, her presence adding weight to the moment. Mr. Harrison, she addressed Hammer. You have a choice to make, just like Jake and his crew did. You can be part of something destructive or something constructive. The decision is yours. Hammer looked around, taking in the scene, the renovated coffee stand, the community center full of youth, the respect in people's eyes when they looked at Jake now. This isn't what bikers do, he said, but his voice held more uncertainty than conviction. Maybe it's time to redefine what bikers can be, Jake suggested. We're still riding, still brothers. We're just standing for something better now. One of the teenagers from the community center, a young man named Marcus, approached cautiously. Mr. Tank's been teaching me motorcycle maintenance, he said proudly. Says maybe I could be a storm rider someday, if I stay in school and keep my grades up. Hammer stared at the kid, then at Tank. You're recruiting from high schools now? We're investing in the future, Tank replied. My daughter helped me see that there's more to legacy than fear. The tension began to dissolve as more community members arrived, going about their morning routines. The scene was peaceful, productive, everything the old storm riders weren't. Finally, Hammer shook his head. You've changed, Thompson, all of you. For the better, Jake replied. The invitation to change with us stands, for all of you. The former members retreated to their bikes, but their exit lacked the threatening energy of their arrival. Something had shifted, not just in the storm riders, but in how others saw them. As the morning settled back into its routine, Maria approached Jake. That couldn't have been easy. Easier than continuing down the old path, Jake admitted. We lost some brothers in this change, but we gained a family, a real one. Inside the community center, Tank's mechanic class resumed. Through the window, they could see him teaching, patient and proud. His daughter sat nearby, doing her homework, and occasionally helping explain things to the younger kids. You know, Elena said, bringing coffee to the group. When you first started this transformation, I thought it was about justice, but it's about more than that, isn't it? Maria watched as Jake greeted another group of local residents, his new role as community guardian sitting naturally on his shoulders. It's about redemption, she replied, about seeing the potential for good in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. The morning sun climbed higher, shining on a community that had learned the true meaning of strength, not through fear or intimidation, but through unity, purpose, and the courage to change. 2 weeks after the confrontation with the former members, Morning Light Coffee hosted an unusual gathering. The Storm Riders, under Jake's leadership, had called a meeting with representatives from other motorcycle clubs in the region. Maria watched from her usual spot as bikers from various groups filled the expanded seating area. "You sure about this?" she asked Jake quietly. "No," he admitted, "but it needs to be done. The old way of doing things? It's dying. They just don't know it yet." The coffee stand had become neutral ground, respected even by those who opposed the Storm Riders' transformation. Elena and Sarah worked steadily, serving coffee to leather-clad men who would have terrified them just weeks ago. Jake stood before the gathered bikers, his modified Storm Riders cut drawing both curious and disapproving looks. "Thanks for coming," he began. "We've got a proposition for all of you." "This better be good, Thompson," growled Red, president of the Desert Hawks. "You've been stirring up a lot of trouble with this community guardian nonsense." "That's exactly what we need to talk about," Jake replied. "The world's changing. Either we change with it, or we become obsolete." He gestured to the community center next door, where Tank's mechanics program was in full swing. Through the windows, they could see teenagers learning to repair motorcycles, their faces eager and focused. "Look at that," Jake continued. "That's not weakness. That's not selling out. That's building a future, a real legacy." Viper, the Iron Wolves leader who had confronted them earlier, leaned forward. "A legacy of what? Playing nice with cops and citizens?" "A legacy of respect," Tank spoke up, joining Jake. "Real respect, not fear. My daughter's proud of me for the first time in her life. Can any of you say that?" The question hit home. Several bikers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Razor stepped forward, addressing the group. "We've got something special happening here. The community trusts us now. We're making a difference, not just making trouble." "And what about territory?" someone called out. "You just giving that up?" "Territory?" Jake laughed. "We've got more influence now than we ever had through intimidation. Businesses call us for help. Kids look up to us. That's real power." Maria observed the reactions in the room. Some bikers nodded thoughtfully, while others scowled. But they were all listening. "Here's the deal," Jake continued. "We're starting a new coalition. Motorcycle clubs focused on community protection and youth mentorship. We've already got programs running, connections with legitimate businesses, even support from law enforcement. You want us to become Boy Scouts?" Red scoffed. "No," Jake replied firmly. "I want us to become what we always claimed to be. Brothers helping our community, not parasites feeding off it." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Even the most hardened bikers couldn't deny the truth in them. Maria stepped forward then, adding her voice to the discussion. "What the Storm Riders have done here isn't just about following the law. It's about finding purpose. Real strength isn't about making people fear you. It's about making them believe in you." Tank's daughter Chelsea entered the coffee stand, carrying some paperwork from the community center. She moved confidently through the crowd of bikers, no longer afraid of them. "The youth program's already got 20 kids signed up for next month," she reported to her father. "And 3 of them want to join the Junior Mechanics Club." The sight of Tank, once the most feared enforcer in the Storm Riders, beaming with genuine pride at his daughter's report, wasn't lost on anyone. "This is what we're offering," Jake said, gesturing to the scene. "A chance to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to build instead of destroy." Viper stood up slowly. "And if we don't want to join your little transformation?" "Then you'll get left behind," Jake replied simply. "Because this is the future. The only question is whether you'll be part of it." The meeting continued as bikers asked questions about the programs, the community involvement, the changes in law enforcement relationships. Some remained skeptical, but others showed genuine interest. Later, as the groups began to disperse, Maria overheard 2 younger bikers talking. "My kid's always asking about my motorcycle," one said quietly. "Maybe that mechanics program ain't such a bad idea." Elena approached Maria, watching the bikers leave. You think any of them will actually change? Some will, Maria replied. Change is like that. It starts small, but it spreads. The storm riders have shown it's possible. That's often all people need, proof that there's another way. Jake joined them, looking tired but satisfied. Never thought I'd be doing something like this, he admitted, trying to change the whole culture. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest stands, Maria reminded him, like a judge serving coffee or a biker choosing to protect instead of intimidate. The sun set on the coffee stand as the last of the motorcycles roared away. But something had shifted in the biker community that day. A seed of change had been planted, and only time would tell how far its roots would spread. A month after the Biker Coalition meeting, Morning Light Coffee buzzed with unprecedented activity. The transformed storm riders had successfully launched their community protection program, and the results were becoming visible throughout the neighborhood. 3 more clubs joined the coalition this week, Jake reported to Maria as she prepared for her morning shift. Even Red's Desert Hawks are starting to come around. And the Iron Wolves? Maria asked, knowing they had been the most resistant. Viper's still holding out, but half his crew's been asking about our youth programs. Change is coming, whether he likes it or not. The coffee stand had evolved into something of a command center for the reformed bikers' community initiatives. Maps on the walls showed patrol routes and safety zones. A bulletin board displayed success stories and upcoming events. Sarah, no longer nervous around the bikers, called out from the counter. Tank's group prevented another break-in last night. 3rd one this month they've stopped. The morning's peace was interrupted by the roar of approaching motorcycles. But instead of tension, the sound now brought curiosity. Viper pulled up alone, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked almost like uncertainty. Thompson, he called out to Jake. We need to talk. Jake exchanged glances with Maria before stepping outside. The 2 biker leaders moved to a quiet corner of the parking lot, their conversation intense but controlled. Elena watched from inside. Never thought I'd see those 2 having a civil conversation. Sometimes the hardest step is admitting you need to change, Maria replied, remembering how far the storm riders had come. After several minutes, Jake and Viper entered the coffee stand together. The Iron Wolves leader looked uncomfortable in this peaceful setting, but there was determination in his eyes. Judge Evans, he addressed Maria directly. I've been watching what's happening here. The changes, the community work. My guys, they're restless. They see the storm riders earning real respect, not just fear. And? Maria prompted, though she suspected she knew what was coming. And maybe it's time the Iron Wolves evolve too. Jake says you're the one who started all this, that you saw something worth saving in them. Maria studied him carefully. I saw people capable of being more than their past. The question is, what do you see when you look at your club's future? Viper glanced around the coffee stand, taking in the transformation. The community bulletin board caught his eye, particularly a photo of Tank teaching teenagers motorcycle maintenance. My nephew, he said quietly. He's 14. Got in trouble last week for stealing. His mom asked me to talk to him, but what am I supposed to say? Don't be a criminal like your uncle? Or, Jake suggested, you could show him there's another way, like we're doing here. Tank emerged from the community center, leading a group of teenagers who had just completed their morning mechanics lesson. Among them was his daughter, Chelsea, now a regular instructor in the program. Mr. Viper? Chelsea approached confidently. We've got room in our next mechanics class if any Iron Wolves kids want to join. Dad says motorcycle skills should be passed down the right way. The mixture of emotions that crossed Viper's face spoke volumes. You're teaching kids? For free? Not just teaching, Tank replied. Mentoring, showing them there's more to brotherhood than causing trouble. Maria watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. This was how real change happened, not through force or fear, but through example and opportunity. The Iron Wolves have a reputation, Viper said slowly. Not all of it good. So did we, Jake reminded him. Reputations can change. Look at us now. Businesses call us for protection. Parents trust us with their kids. Cops work with us instead of against us. Sarah approached with coffee for everyone, including Viper. He stared at the cup in surprise, much as Jake had done weeks ago. The community's always ready to welcome those who want to help build it up, Maria told him. The question is, are you ready to be those people? Before Viper could respond, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. A group of teenagers on motorcycles, led by Hammer's son, had pulled into the parking lot. They were part of a new troublemaking crew calling themselves the Young Wolves. Great, Viper muttered. My nephew's with them. Jake straightened up. Then this is your chance. Show him what real leadership looks like. The moment hung in the balance as Viper considered his options. Finally, he squared his shoulders and walked outside, but not with his usual aggressive stance. Instead, he approached the young riders with purpose. Tommy, he called to his nephew, you and your friends need to come inside. There's something you need to see. The teenagers exchanged uncertain looks, but the authority in Viper's voice was clear. One by one, they dismounted and followed him into the coffee stand. Welcome to Morning Light Coffee, Maria greeted them. I believe Tank's about to start another mechanics lesson. Anyone interested? What followed was a turning point, not just for the Iron Wolves, but for the entire biker community. As Viper watched his nephew's eyes light up during Tank's lesson, something shifted in his expression. Okay, he said finally, turning to Jake and Maria. Show me how this works. Show me how to make the Iron Wolves into something worth being proud of. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Former rivals working together, teaching the next generation, building something positive. You know, Elena said to Maria, when you first confronted the Storm Riders, I thought you were just serving justice, but you were serving something more important. Hope, Maria replied, watching the transformation continue to unfold. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can offer someone, the hope of being better than they are. 6 weeks after Viper's decision to transform the Iron Wolves, Morning Light Coffee hosted its first official Community Unity event. The parking lot had been transformed into a festival space, with booths showcasing the various programs the reformed motorcycle clubs had initiated. If you'd told me 3 months ago that we'd be hosting a family event with bikers, Elena laughed, setting up the coffee station, I'd have said you were crazy. The Storm Riders and Iron Wolves worked side by side, setting up displays about their youth mentorship programs, community patrols, and motorcycle safety classes. Tank's mechanics workshop had expanded to include members from 3 different clubs teaching local teens. Jake stood beside the main stage they'd constructed, looking slightly uncomfortable in his role as keynote speaker. Maria approached, carrying his coffee. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, he admitted. Give me a gang fight any day over public speaking. Just speak from the heart, she advised. That's what got us here in the first place. The event drew hundreds of community members, including families who once would have crossed the street to avoid bikers. Children ran around wearing miniature versions of the new Community Guardian patches, while teenagers clustered around the mechanics demonstration area. Hammer, who had been one of the most vocal opponents of the changes, arrived unexpectedly with his son. They stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Tank teach a group of kids about engine maintenance. Never thought I'd see this, Hammer muttered as Maria approached. The mighty Storm Riders running a damn carnival. It's more than that, Maria replied. Look closer. Around them, the scene told a story of transformation. Viper's nephew Tommy was helping younger kids with a motorcycle safety demonstration. Chelsea, Tank's daughter, ran a booth about the youth mentorship program she'd helped design. Even some of the older, hardcore bikers were engaged, sharing stories with interested community members about their journey from intimidation to protection. Your son seems interested, Maria noted, watching Hammer's boy drift toward the mechanics area. He's always loved bikes, Hammer admitted. I never thought about teaching him the right way. The festival reached its peak as Jake took the stage. His nervousness fell away as he looked out at the gathered crowd. Bikers, families, business owners, all united in this transformed community. 3 months ago, Jake began, we thought we knew what strength was. We thought it was about fear, about control. We were wrong. Real strength? It's standing together. It's building something instead of tearing it down. He gestured to the surrounding booths and activities. Look around. This is strength. This is power. Not because we're forcing it, but because we're choosing it. Every day, we're choosing to be better than we were. Maria watched as his words resonated through the crowd. Even Hammer seemed affected, especially when Jake spoke about legacy. What do we want our kids to remember about us? Jake asked. That we were tough guys who scared people, or that we were the ones who stood up and made a difference? The afternoon continued with more demonstrations and activities. The police chief, who had come to support the event, found himself in a friendly motorcycle maintenance discussion with Tank and several other reformed bikers. This is real community policing, he told Maria, when former adversaries become partners in protecting the neighborhood. As the sun began to set, Hammer approached Jake and Maria. His usual gruff demeanor had softened somewhat. My boy, he said hesitantly. He wants to join the youth mechanics program. Says he wants to learn from Tank. Jake smiled. Class starts Monday. He'll need a parent to sign the permission form. Hammer nodded slowly. Maybe you've got room for an old mechanic to help teach. Been working on bikes for 30 years. Always room for more mentors, Jake replied, understanding the significance of the offer. The festival wound down as evening approached, but its impact was clear. Business owners chatted easily with bikers about neighborhood safety. Parents exchanged contact information for youth programs. The barrier between them and us had begun to crumble. Elena joined Maria as they watched the cleanup effort, where bikers and community members worked together with easy familiarity. You know what amazes me most? Elena said. It's not just that they changed, it's that they made everyone else change too. The way people see them, see each other. That's the real transformation, Maria agreed. Not just in actions, but in perceptions, in possibilities. As the last booths were packed away, Jake gathered the bikers for a final word. The setting sun cast long shadows as former rivals stood together, their cuts displaying various club patches, but all bearing the new Community Guardian symbol. This is just the beginning, he told them. We're rewriting what it means to be bikers, what it means to be a community, and we're doing it together. Maria watched them, remembering that first confrontation at the coffee stand. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest stands, like a judge serving coffee or a biker choosing to protect instead of intimidate. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was real and growing. And it had all started because someone saw the potential for good in those society had written off as lost causes. 1 year after Maria Evans first confronted the Storm Riders at Morning Light Coffee, the stand had become the heart of a transformed community. The morning sun rose on a special celebration, the official opening of the Riders Community Youth Center, converted from what had once been an abandoned warehouse the gangs used for trouble. Maria arrived early, as she always did on her Wednesday shifts, to find Jake already there. He stood looking at a wall of photographs documenting their journey, from that first confrontation to today's celebration. Hard to believe it's been a year, he said as Maria joined him. Having second thoughts? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Jake smiled, gesturing to a group of teenage apprentices arriving for their morning mechanics lesson with Tank. Not a chance. For the first time in my life, I'm proud of what we're building. The youth center was a testament to how far they'd come. One wing housed Tank's expanded mechanics program, now officially certified for vocational training. Another section contained classrooms where former bikers taught everything from motorcycle safety to business skills. The main hall served as a community gathering space. Elena arrived with Sarah, both carrying boxes of pastries for the celebration. You should see the lineup outside, Elena reported. Half the neighborhood's here already. Including some surprises, Sarah added with a meaningful look. As if on cue, a familiar rumble of motorcycles filled the air, but instead of bringing tension, it brought smiles. The Iron Wolves rolled in, led by Viper, followed by the Desert Hawks and 3 other formerly rival clubs. All their cuts now bore the Community Guardian patch alongside their club insignias. More surprising was who came with them. Hammer, riding with his son behind him, both wearing newly modified Storm Riders cuts. "Never thought I'd see that," Tank said, joining them outside. His daughter Chelsea stood beside him, now a full-time youth program coordinator. The parking lot filled quickly with an unlikely mix: bikers, families, business owners, and community leaders. Even Judge Harrison arrived, her stern demeanor softening as she watched former defendants now leading community programs. "You were right," she told Maria quietly. "Sometimes justice needs a different approach." The ceremony began with Jake at the podium, looking far more comfortable with public speaking than he had a few months ago. Behind him, the youth center's sign read, "Rising Riders Community Center, Building Tomorrow's Leaders." "A year ago," Jake began, "we thought we were strong because we made people fear us. Today, we're truly strong because we help people believe in themselves. This center isn't just about transforming buildings. It's about transforming lives." He gestured to the gathered crowd. "Look around. Former rivals working together. Kids learning from mentors who used to be their neighborhood's biggest threat. Families feeling safe because we protect instead of intimidate." Viper stood with his nephew Tommy, now one of the youth program's success stories. Red and his Desert Hawks had become instrumental in the community patrol program. Even some of the most hardened former gang members had found purpose in mentorship roles. "But none of this would have happened," Jake continued, "if one person hadn't seen beyond who we were to who we could be." He turned to Maria. "Judge Evans didn't just serve us coffee that morning. She served us a chance at redemption. And that changed everything." Maria hadn't planned to speak, but Jake's gesture brought her to the podium. Looking out at the gathered faces, so many lives touched by this transformation, she found the words. "I'm not standing here as a judge," she began. "I'm here as a member of this community. What we've witnessed this past year isn't just about reformed bikers or successful programs. It's about the power of believing in people's capacity to change." She looked at Elena, remembering her sister's initial fear of the bikers. Now Elena was helping coordinate youth program meals and mentoring young entrepreneurs. This coffee stand became more than just a business. It became a symbol of transformation. But the real change wasn't in the building or the programs. It was in hearts and minds, in the choice to be better than we were yesterday. The ceremony continued with ribbon cuttings, tours, and celebrations. Young apprentices proudly demonstrated their mechanical skills. Former rivals shared laughs over coffee. Children played safely under the watchful eyes of their newfound community guardians. As evening approached, Maria found herself back at the coffee stand with Jake, Elena, and Tank. The sunset painted the sky in colors of promise as they reflected on their journey. "You know what I realized?" Tank said, watching his daughter lead a group of young teens through a program orientation. "We were always looking for respect in all the wrong places. Now you've got something real to be proud of," Elena added, serving a fresh round of coffee. Jake nodded, looking out at their transformed community. "We all do, and this is just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Maria asked, though she smiled knowing his answer. "Of showing other communities it's possible," Jake replied. "That change isn't just about programs or buildings. It's about believing in better possibilities." As night fell, the celebration wound down, but the energy of transformation remained. The coffee stand that had once been a battleground now stood as a beacon of hope. The bikers who had meant to intimidate had become protectors, and a community that had lived in fear now thrived in unity. Maria's Wednesday morning shifts at Morning Light Coffee continued, but now they meant something different. Each cup served was a reminder that justice comes in many forms, and sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest acts of courage. The story of how a judge serving coffee changed a community had spread far beyond their neighborhood. Other clubs from other cities began reaching out, seeking guidance on their own transformations. The ripple effect continued to grow, proving that one person standing up for what's right could inspire others to do the same. As the last guests left the celebration, Maria looked at the coffee stand where it all began, then at the new youth center that represented where they were heading. "Some people might call this a happy ending," Elena said, joining her. "No," Maria replied, watching a new group of bikes arrive, another club interested in changing their ways. "This isn't an ending at all, it's a beginning. And the best stories never really end. They just inspire new ones to start."